They buried our names, rewrote our legacy. But through the ashes, the blood still speaks. From Moorish courts to Louisiana sugar fields, this is the true story they tried to erase. Nobility, reclassified, royalty enslaved. Yet the fire never died. It lives in the bloodline. This is more than history. It's restoration. It's reclamation. It's truth. Bloodlines of Fire. Available now on Amazon KDP.
Peace, foundational Black American family. Today, we're going to be talking about a foundational Black American inventor who invented the clothes drying machine. His name is George T. Sampson. So let's get into it. Born July 24th on 1861, George T. Sampson was a FBA inventor, best known for patenting an early clothes drying machine. Now, details of Sampson's early life is scarce, even sometimes contradictory. Some accounts do indicate he was born in Palmyra, New York, possibly to a mother who had been enslaved prior to the Civil War. Now, there's other sources that place his upbringing in Dayton, Ohio, which is the city he would later live in as an adult. Now, by the 1880s, Samson, he indeed resided in Dayton, and it was evidenced by his patent records, which listed him as of Dayton, Ohio at the time. Little was documented about his family, though, or his education. Now, there's one popular anecdote that suggests after his mother's death, when Samson was still a young boy, he was responsible for chores like drying the laundry, a task that was brutal at the time. Now, according to this story, failing to finish drying all the clothes would result in a punishment. Supposedly, that's what inspired Samson to devise a better method for drying clothes. Now, while the exact truth of this tale is uncertain, it's a reflection of the environment of necessity and hardship in which many 19th century foundational Black Americans lived under. What is clear is that Samson came of age in post-Reconstruction America, a period when foundational Black Americans faced significant social and economic hurdles, even as some, like Samson, pursued technical innovation. And with Samson technical innovation came the 1892 clothes drying machine invention. On June 7, 1892, the foundational Black American George T. Sampson received U.S. patent number 476,416 for a clothes dryer. Now, this invention was essentially an early form of an automated clothes dryer designed to speed up laundry drying indoors. Prior to Samson innovation, clothes dryers in use, which was primarily used in Europe, were crude devices called ventilators. They were basically metal drums that were hand cranked over open fire. Now, those earlier dryers, they often left the clothes smelling like smoke, covered in black soot, or even caused garments to catch on fire. Literally, the clothes was catching on fire, trying to dry it. Drying laundry in America still usually meant hanging wet clothes on the lines, either outside or near a source of heat, which was time-consuming and weather-dependent. If it was raining or it was the winter time, it was obvious a challenge to dry your clothes. Now, Samson's clothes drying machine was a significant improvement over these methods. His design did away with the open flame and the rotating barrels of European ventilators. Instead, Samson created a frame apparatus that could be placed in close proximity to a common heat source, like a household stove. In his patent specification, Samson described, "The object of my invention is to suspend clothing in close relations to a stove by means of frames so constructed that they can be readily placed in proper position and put aside when not required for use." In practice, the device was a frame or rack that could be mounted near or over a stove and folded away when not in use. Now, when you hung your clothes on this frame, your clothes would dry way more faster using the heat from the stove. Yet, keep your clothes at a safe enough distance that would avoid scorching it or smoke damage. Samson's patent dryer included features like hinged arms, an overhead supporting rod, and even a drip pan to catch water, showing a thoughtful design for indoor use. You don't want wet clothes dripping, getting your floor wet. The frame could be swung into positions above the stove when needed and folded vertically when not in use, with a simple pivoting button latched to lock it in the horizontal drying position. This clever folding rack allowed the good volume of clothes to be dried using the stove heat without requiring a fire directly underneath the clothes. Now, Samson's 1892 patent drawing depicted a wall-mounted frame above a stove. His design used the stove's hot air to dry the clothes, eliminating the open flames and smoke that plagued earlier dry devices. This innovation was essentially a ventilator-type dryer that used frames instead of rotating barrels, making it safer and even more practical for home use. What made Samson's dryer different and important was that it eliminated the need for an open flame and kept clothes from direct contact with smoke or fire. What's the use of washing your clothes if they're not smelling like Tide? You wash your clothes, then after you dry it, it smell like barbecue. Laundry was tough before a foundational Black American brother, Samson, invented this dryer. And the genius behind his invention was, by using the existing kitchen stove as a heat source and a suspending garment above it, Samson's innovation avoided the common problem of soot and fire risk. Genius. As one historical summary notes, his device featured a rack to keep the clothes from catching fire or becoming damaged. It utilized a stove's heat, which was much safer than an open fire. See the genius and ingenuity of a foundational Black American? They was using straight up fire before our brother Samson came up with the idea of drying your clothes with heat. In essence, Samson's clothes dryer was the first American patent machine to make indoor clothes drying convenient and relatively safe. It paved the way for modern dryers by introducing the core idea of using heat, air, in an enclosed, controlled way to dry laundry. Electrical tumble dryers would not appear till around 1915, and the first fully automated dryer wasn't produced until 1938. Samson's 1892 invention, therefore, filled an important gap in laundry technology, allowing people to dry clothes indoors in any weather using their stove, a substantial quality of life improvement at the time. Samson's original patent was titled simply clothes dryer. He filed this patent on June 24, 1891, and it was granted in 1892. The patent documents include diagrams. It shows the detailed constructions of his dryer, a cast iron frame bolted to the floor behind the stove, with collapsing horizontal racks and hinge extensions to hold multiple layers of clothes. His ingenuity of the design is evident. It maximized the use of rising heat from a stove and could be stowed away to save space when not in use. Samson's own words in the patent emphasize easy of use and flexibility. The frame can be readily placed in proper position and put aside when not required, and they can be swung toward or away from the stove as needed. Now, in short, Samson's clothes drying machine was a practical household appliance that foreshadowed the functionality of later electric dryers, minus the automation. Now, Samson's patent never used the term automatic. It was not a power dryer, but later writers often called it the first automatic clothes dryer because it was a self-containing drying apparatus not requiring manual cranking of a drum. Now, it's important to note that Samson's invention did not tumble the clothes. It was a stationary rack system. Still, it was a critical step toward modern dryers. What it proved is that one could dry clothes indoors efficiently using heated air circulating without direct flame contact. Samson's patent even explicitly claims the combination of elements as new and useful. The inclusion of the full patent title, number, and the date of this exact discussion, it underscores the legitimacy of Samson's contributions. The original patent diagrams available from the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office archives shows the ingenuity of his design, and it is preserved as part of American patent history. Beyond the clothes dryer, George T. Sampson had at least one other notable invention, a sled propeller. This was actually Samson's first invention, several years earlier before the dryer. On February 17, 1885, he received the U.S. patent number 300,012-388 for a sled propeller. The sled propeller device was an early attempt to propel a sled using pedal power. Essentially, it was the innovation that foreshadowed elements of the modern-day snowmobile. Now, Samson's design involved attaching a propelling mechanism to a three-wheeled cycle frame. It was like taking the tires off a three-wheeler and replacing the wheels with skates, runners for traveling on snow. The rear part of the tricycle frame, it carried the roughened drive wheel connected by a chain to a foot pedal, treadles. So when the rider pedaled, the drive wheel would turn and push the sled across the snow. He designed a steering mechanism using a front runner that could pivot via a handle, similar to how one would steer a bicycle or a tricycle. Samson describes this as a certain new and useful improvement in a propeller for sleds, and said that the combination of the ground wheel, pulleys, endless chain, treadle shift, and frame on runner as his invention. In simpler terms, it was a pedal-powered snow sled. Contemporary summaries note that people occupying the sled would operate the propeller with their feet using pedals, exactly as Samson detailed, and that his diagrams for this pattern, like the clothes dryers, are preserved in the USPTO records. The sled propeller patent, number 312,388, didn't come a widely adopted vehicle, but it did bring Samson a bit of local recognition in 1885. Now it's interesting to consider that Samson's inventive interests span very different domains, from winter transportation to domestic chores, suggesting a versatile mechanical creativity. As for other occupations, there's little on record. It's not documented that Samson was formally trained as an engineer. Like most foundational Black American inventors at the time, our ingenuity came out of necessity. He was likely self-taught or learned through practice work. In Dayton city dictionaries of that era, many foundational Black Americans worked as laborers, craftsmen, or in service jobs. But we don't have a confirmed listing for Samson's trade. It's plausible he worked in a field related to machinery or maintenance, given his evident mechanical skills, but no specific employment is known from surviving sources. Samson's legacy rests primarily in his patents rather than any business he ran. Unlike some inventors, he didn't establish a known company to manufacture clothes dryers or sleds. It's possible he sold or licensed his ideas, or they remain as patent models and plans. The historical record is silent on whether he profited from these inventions. Nevertheless, by holding multiple patents in the late 19th century, George T. Sampson was part of a small but significant group of foundational Black American inventors who contributed innovations despite the barriers of the time. George T. Sampson lived and worked in the post-Reconstruction era, a period roughly from the 1870s through the early 1900s. This was a challenging environment for foundational Black Americans, especially in fields like science and invention. At the end of Reconstruction in 1877, it led to the rise of Jim Crow segregation and widespread discrimination. Opportunities for Black inventors were extremely limited. Access to education, capital, and industrial networks was all curtailed by racial prejudice. In spite of this, a number of Black inventors emerged and managed to secure patents during the late 19th century. Samson is often noted as one of the first foundational Black American inventors of note in the 19th century. Obtaining a U.S. patent itself was an achievement. Before 1865, enslaved people couldn't legally hold patents. Their inventions could be claimed by their enslavers. And even free Black inventors faced skepticism and racism in the patent process. By 1892, when Samson got his dryer patent, foundational Black Americans had begun to be recognized by the U.S. Patent Office. For example, famed foundational Black American inventors like Lewis Lattimore, who improved the light bulb and telephone, had been working with Alexander Graham Bell and Thomas Edison in the 1880s. The Patent Office librarian Henry E. Baker himself, a foundational Black American, undertook efforts to compile multiple lists of Black patent holders around this time to highlight their contributions. Samson's patents appear in such historical lists of foundational Black American inventors, alongside those of his Black contemporaries like Relu, Scotton, and McCoy. However, being granted a patent, it didn't guarantee commercial success or fame. Now, Black inventors back in those times often lacked the resources to manufacture or market their inventions on a large scale. Now, it's likely that Samson's clothes dryer rack was built and used, but in limited numbers. It didn't become a mass-produced appliance under his name. In fact, a white inventor named J. Ross Moore later developed the electric tumbler dryer in the 1930s. That was a long time after what Samson did as far as his dryer invention. J. Ross Moore 1930s improvement of the dryer became the basis for commercial products. Moore is often credited in mainstream histories for the modern dryer, while Samson's early contributions went relatively unnoticed outside of Black history circles. This lack of recognition during Samson's lifetime is sadly typical for foundational Black American inventors. Post-Reconstruction, Black inventors were rarely given public credit. Their inventions were either quietly used or even sometimes appropriated by others. It saddens me that our foundational Black American brother Samson likely saw little financial reward or public acclaim for his 1892 invention. The social context of Samson's life also includes the Great Migration's earlier phases. Many Black families moving north or west for better opportunities, and there was a rise in Black communities in cities like Dayton. Dayton, Ohio, in the late 19th century had a small but growing foundational Black American population and was home to others who would become notable. For example, Oliver and Wilbur Wright, though white, did the inventions of the airplane in Dayton just a decade after Samson's patent. You know something? It's really inspiring to realize that foundational Black Americans like Samson was participating in this broader, innovative spirit of the age, even if on a smaller scale. Black newspapers of the time, when they existed, sometimes highlighted the achievements of inventors as role models. It's not clear if Samson's patents were reported in the press in 1892, but later on, Black history enthusiasts and educators certainly highlighted him. Modern accounts underscored that Samson's work allowed us to appreciate how our contributions to society could better everyone's lives. In the words of one Black history writer in short, George T. Sampson's story sits at the intersection of foundational Black American preservation and American technological progress. Now, his achievements, it amplifies the often under-acknowledged role of foundational Black American inventors in an era when they had to overcome tremendous odds to contribute to society. Now, it's a lot of confusion, myths, and misidentification going on with brother George T. Sampson. Due to the fact that there's limited information on Samson, various bits of misinformation or confusion have cropped up over time. One point of confusion concerns his personal details, birthplace, and death. As noted, some sources gave Palmyra, New York as his place of birth, while others mentioned Dayton, Ohio. It's possible that he was born in New York. Perhaps his family moved north from the south and later grew up in Ohio. But definitive records are lacking. Likewise, Samson's date of death is uncertain. A few references claim he died in 1902, allegedly of complications that today might be described as Alzheimer's disease. If true, he would have been only 40 to 41 years old at death. That's real young. But however, this claim appears in informal sources, like a social media post of a family reunion group and a student presentation. The Find a Grave database entry for George T. Sampson lists the birthday of July 28, 1861, but no confirmed date of death. But it does note that he was connected to Dayton, Ohio. Given the logistics, it's safest to say that the later life and death of George T. Sampson, it still remains unclear, which was not an uncommon faith for foundational Black Americans of that era whose accomplishments were not widely recorded by the mainstream. Another area of confusion is credited for the invention of the clothes dryer. In popular Black History Month lists, Samson is often celebrated as the inventor of the automated clothes dryer, which is accurate in the sense of his 1892 patent. But general historical accounts of laundry technology omit him or misattribute the first dryer to others. For instance, some write-ups, even an Irish news article, mistakenly cited George Sampson in 1896 as creating the first tumble dryer, likely a reference to R. George T. Sampson, but with the year misstated. His patent was actually 1892. This kind of mix-up shows how easily details could be lost or twisted when the history isn't well known. It has also been noted that Samson's dryer was not a tumbling dryer with a rotating drum, but yet phrases like first tumbling dryer get loosely applied, causing technical inaccuracies. Samson's design was a stationary frame dryer, not a drum. The true drum type electric tumble dryer, that came later. Some skeptics or even historians have tried to to downplay Samson's achievement by pointing out that his machine wasn't the same as a modern dryer. For example, one critical source notes Samson's clothes dryer was basically a frame over a stove, which is true. But see, that critique misses the importance of his improvement. Eliminating open flames and introducing a convenient frame was an innovation that paved the way for safer dryers. Using heat instead of open flames to dry clothes, Samson laid the foundation for the modern day dryer. We should also clear up potential name confusion. George T. Sampson should not be confused with George Sampson without the T in other contexts. One famous George Sampson was a 20th century British dancer/celebrity, totally unrelated to George T. Sampson. In the realm of inventors, the closest name is Henry T. Sampson, a black engineer who lived much later, between 1934 and 2015, and co-invented a gimme electric cell. Occasionally, people see the surname and middle initial T and erroneously link Henry T. Sampson to George T. Sampson dryer invention. But in reality, they are completely different individuals in different eras. Henry T. Sampson had no connection to the clothes dryer. His work was in nuclear engineer, and it was sometimes incorrectly cited in internet black inventors list. George T. Sampson, on the other hand, was a 19th century figure focused on domestic inventions. In summary, while George T. Sampson's name is increasingly found in educational materials and black history compilations, one must navigate a few inconsistencies. His legacy was long overlooked, leading to gaps that later researchers have tried to fill. Not always with complete accuracy though. Nonetheless, the core facts are verified by U.S. Patent Office's records. George T. Sampson of Dayton, Ohio patents an improved clothes drying apparatus in 1892. And this stands as a genius to American innovation. Now, George T. Sampson inventions, it didn't immediately revolutionize American laundry practices. Change came gradually. However, his clothes dryer concept clearly influenced later designs and demonstrated the feasibility of automated drying without outdoor air. By the early 20th century, a few indoor dryer designs emerged, building on the idea of using heat air instead of ventilated air. For example, electric and gas dryers in the 1910s and 1930s. It's likely that engineers working on those earlier electric dryer designs were aware, at least generally, of prior patents like Samson's. Even if Samson himself did not directly collaborate in later developments, his patents contributed to the state of the art. Modern write-ups credit him as laying the groundwork for today's dryer. The Hamilton Manufacturing Company's first automated dryer in 1938, for example, solved many technical problems, but the fundamental idea of safely drying clothes indoor had already been proven by inventors like Samson decades before. During Samson's own lifetime, there's no evidence that he was widely honored for his work. Unfortunately, he didn't gain that level of fame of, say, Elijah McCoy or Granville T. Woods, prominent foundational black inventors of that era. It seems, for the most part, his accomplishments was recognized posthumously. In the mid-20th century, black historians and educators began to celebrate pioneers like Samson as part of reclaiming foundational black Americans' contributions. For instance, during Black History Month today, it's common to see George T. Sampson included in lists of black inventors who improved everyday life, often alongside the likes of Madam C.J. Walker, Garrett Morgan, etc. Educational websites and publications also highlight we owe the luxury of drying our laundry indoors to George T. Sampson. The National Museum of African American History and Culture, Smithsonian, has acknowledged Samson on social media, celebrating the anniversary of his patent. He's featured in school curriculums and children's books about inventors and showing that the new generation learn his name. Samson's legacy, it's also tied to the broader narrative of foundational black American innovation. His story, it's an underscore that foundational black Americans were actively inventing and patenting in the 1880s and 1890s, even if mainstream history overlooked them. As one commentator put it, if not for the blueprints from George T. Sampson, the modern day clothes dryer invention would not be what it is today. In other words, later inventors like J. Ross Moore built upon the foundation that included Samson's ideas. Today, every time someone tosses wet laundry into an automated dryer, they benefiting from a series of innovations, among which George T. Sampson 1892 patent holds an important place and laid the foundation for the modern day dryer. In conclusion, George T. Sampson stands as a testament to black ingenuity in post-Reconstruction America. From a humble background and confronted with the errors of injustice, he managed to identify everyday problems and devise practical solutions. His 1892 clothes dryer machine was significant for its time. Let's keep it a buck. Making laundry faster and easier. It foreshadowed the appliances we now consider essential. Sampson also dabbled in transportation innovation with his sled propeller, showing a creative mind at work. Now, while much of his life remained a mystery and he did not receive widespread recognition while alive, Sampson's contributions have since been rightfully acknowledged. He is now honored as a trailblazer who helped revolutionize the way we do laundry. He's an inventor whose idea to harness heat and airflow for drying clothes was ahead of his time. And though his dryer invention was a great accomplishment, let's not forget he laid the groundwork for the modern day snowmobile. The legacy of George T. Sampson is a reminder that foundational black American inventors have long been a part of America's innovative spirit, solving everyday problems and quietly shaping the comforts of modern life. The foundational Black American family love, our brother, George T. Sampson. If you made it to the end, you know one thing. FBA Stoic truly appreciate your patience. The book is out, Bloodlines of Fire, the legacy of a foundational Black American dynasty. It's available on Amazon Prime. Go cop that. It's about the bloodline. It's about how we started from royalty and ended up in slavery. And it's all from my family tree. All documented, family records, all proof. No hearsay, no folklore, everything documented. But I'ma catch you in the next one. My foundational Black American family. Peace.
They buried our names, rewrote our legacy. But through the ashes, the blood still speaks. From Moorish courts to Louisiana sugar fields, this is the true story they tried to erase. Nobility, reclassified, royalty enslaved. Yet the fire never died. It lives in the bloodline. This is more than history. It's restoration. It's reclamation. It's truth. Bloodlines of Fire. Available now on Amazon KDP.